So welcome everybody to the Tizard Centre Monthly Journal Club. This is our way of disseminating good behavior analytic practice from all over the world, and that's why we do it online. I'm Thanos Vostanis. I'm a lecturer here at the Tizard Centre, where we have our verified ABAI master's courses in Applied Behaviour Analysis and Positive Behaviour Support. Just to say, we're offering a free CEU today, and I'm going to be giving you 3 keywords throughout Joe's presentation. So I'm not going to be interrupting you, Joe. I'll just interrupt you 3 points just to deliver the keywords for people who are claiming CEUs. Those of you who are not familiar with the Tizard Centre, we do a lot of work with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have a peer-reviewed journal. It's called Tizard Learning Disability Review. So if any of you have good practice that you would like to disseminate to other practitioners, please do consider submitting with us at TLDR. And we also, on the 3rd of February, are hosting a webinar regarding our courses. So if any of you are considering studying with us at the Tizard Centre, the 3rd of February, 12 to 1 UK time, we're going to be hosting Dr. Triantafilopoulou and Tomlinson, who are going to be discussing our courses. I'm going to pop some more information in the chat, but I don't want to take more time from Joe. We are welcoming Dr. Lucyshyn today, and it's a really great pleasure to have you here with us today, Joe. And I'm really sorry about the technical issues we are experiencing, but I'm hopeful that the session is going to go on just fine since we can see your slides and have sound. I'm sure you've all seen his bio in our flyer. So, Joe, if you would like to just talk to us a bit about your current work, if there is any nice projects you're working on, and then you can feel free to take it away and come on with your presentation. Thank you again for being with us today, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you for your very gracious introduction. So here I am, the disembodied voice. It's very nice to be with all of you. You may be hearing my cat caterwauling in the background. She's asking to have her belly rub. I have to ask my wife right now to attend to her, or else she's going to be making lots of noise. I think it's okay now. So about my work, most of my research is in the area of family-centered positive behavior support, which I've been doing since 1990, actually, 1992. I think I began my first research study in that area. The research that I'm doing right now include family-centered PBS has largely been designed as a tertiary level support, where you're working with children with very severe problem behaviors, with developmental disabilities in family contexts. And we've done quite a few studies across, both me and my colleagues, all through not only the United States and Canada, but also throughout the world. There's now 30 studies that have been done using single case design methodologies, and one of my students recently completed a meta-analysis of that research and was able to reveal a pretty strong effect size of that work in family-centered PBS across different types of disability, different research groups, and also different countries. But it also allowed us to recognize that we really need to be building a multi-tiered system of support, which is common to a PBS approach. And so right now I'm doing research on a secondary prevention model of family-centered PBS. And me and some colleagues over several years have developed about 14 modules, which would be presented in a small group of parents who would benefit from secondary prevention instead of needing tertiary support. And so these modules represent what we believe are universal positive behavior support strategies that all families should be using. And if they do, they may be able to prevent problem behaviors from escalating to a level where they need tertiary support. Another area of research I'm involved in is what we call culturally responsive positive behavior support. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. It's a very diverse community. There are, I think 40% of the population is of Asian heritage. And so we are learning through some other research I'm doing how to provide culture responsive services to families from other cultures, such as families who are of Japanese heritage or Chinese heritage or Taiwanese heritage or from India. So in this area, one would say Punjabi heritage from that part of India. And we've been studying this for quite a few years, and we're about to publish a mixed method study that we did with a Taiwanese family, and I'll be sharing that with you today. So that's my other area of research. What does it mean to provide culture responsive positive behavior support services? A third area of my research is on mindfulness with parents and children. I've had a mindfulness practice for about 40 years, and you may be familiar with some research by Nirvay Singh and his colleagues, which has begun to show us that if we can teach parents of children with disability who are experiencing lots of parental stress, if we can teach them a mindfulness practice, that can not only help reduce their stress, but also it has the apparent collateral effect of improving the relationship with their child with disability and also improving behavior. And so I'm doing a few studies on mindfulness practices. So that's my research.
Which is super exciting. Thanks for that, Joe. It's cutting edge positive behavior support, as it sounds like. So we're really excited to hear what you've got in store for us today.
Yeah, and what I want to emphasize is when I talk about positive behavior support, I think you know that I'm talking about applied behavior analysis as well, because the conceptual framework that we use to understand behavior, whether we're looking at problem behavior in the home, in a school situation, or in a community context, is applied behavior analysis. The laws of behaviors are applying. We have to understand them, the full four-part contingency, setting events, discriminative stimuli or antecedent triggers, the behavior of concern, and the maintaining consequences. And we have to understand that in an ecological way if we really want to promote meaningful, durable, and sustainable change. So with no further ado, I'm going to talk to you about family-centered PBS, lesson learned for promoting transformational change in child and family lives. So as I mentioned, family-centered PBS is a tertiary level form of positive behavior intervention supports. It's essentially FA-based PBS plans, but also family-centered service delivery. Family-centered services have been shown to be really important when you're working with families. Carl Dunst and his colleagues have done research on the value of family-centered service delivery, and he has in the past decade or so done a meta-analysis of many family-centered research studies and has shown that family-centered service delivery really improves the quality of outcomes for children and families. And some qualities of family-centered services that we integrate into a process of family-centered PBS is, for example, the whole family is a unit of analysis, the unit of attention, not just the child, that families are partners in this work, and that's also a feature of positive behavior support in general. Also, we operate from a strengths perspective. We see all families having strengths, no matter what challenges they're facing and difficulties they're having. Also, we want to recognize their natural resources and integrate them into the process as well. And by integrating family-centered delivery into our work in the area of PBS with families, we're finding it to be really helpful. This shows you an example. The full triangle shows you what a multi-tiered system might look like. The middle part of that triangle, targeted materials and activities, group-based parent education, is what I'm now focused on. And as far as that foundational piece, where you see the bricks, we always attend to this foundational piece too in our work. There's the marital system operating. You have to know how to operate within that. There's a sibling system operating. You need to know how to operate in that. and there's also an extended family system. So you can't really work and be successful at the level of success we want to achieve, which is transformational change for not just the child, but the family as a whole. You can't really do that work without attending to the full family system and recognizing the different parts of it that are strengths, which you want to build on, or shortcomings or challenges that you have to work with the family if they're willing to improve. Also below that is mental health and well-being. And this is where mindfulness comes in. Those who study mindfulness have learned that it really helps create well-being. It improves mental health and well-being. And the studies that psychologists have done on the concept of mindfulness have shown that it improves 4 qualities of well-being: conation, attention, cognition, and emotion. Conation is your intention to do what you say you're going to do. I said I'm going to do this, and then you do it. That's conation. Attention is you're going to pay attention to what's in front of you and see it clearly. Cognition means you can pull up the cognitions that are relevant to this moment and act on them. And emotion means you can recognize your affect, but not let that affect interfere with whatever you need to do. And a mindfulness practice really helps bring all of those things together in a way that actually helps families not only decrease their parental stress as they raise a child with a disability and problem behavior, but also it helps them be more in tune with the process of positive behavior support, more able to remember and engage in positive behavior support with their child in situations where problem behavior might occur. And although this is not a scientific concept, it is a perennial concept and an eternal concept that families are based on love. That's why the family's together. That's why the children are there. And so it's really important, given all our, despite all our, it's really important in addition to all of our technical knowledge to recognize that this is all about love for the family. And it's also important to recognize that in the historical literature on love, which goes back thousands of years, it is argued that it's a very powerful force. And that is what our experience is, that when we recognize that families are highly motivated by the love they have for their child, they will indeed be able to do many things that are challenging because love is indeed a powerful force. So that's what the larger structure from which we do our work. So family-centered PBS integrates 3 theories. Behavioral theory, as represented by B.F. Skinner, but also my mentor, Dr. Robert Horner, who is one of the founders of Positive Behavior Support, and in his group's large contribution to Applied Behavior Analysis when Positive Behavior Support was initiated in the 1990s, was a recognition that one does not only change behavior through teaching and consequences, which are the third and fourth part of the 4-part contingency, but also you can build a science of prevention by attending to the antecedent side, the stimulus control side, in the setting, event, and establishing operation side. And so if you can really understand how to occasion desired behavior through stimulus control, through antecedent support, and also learn how to build environments that promote positive behavior, that increase the value of engaging in adaptive behavior through the way in which you manipulate issues of lifestyle and quality of life, which are in many ways technically setting events or establishing operations. You can build a technology of positive behavior support that's primarily preventive. But also, I have been deeply informed by the work of Jerry Patterson and his partner in research in life, Marion Forgach. I am from Oregon. I studied with the Oregon Social Learning Center, which Jerry Patterson established back in the 1970s. And I had an opportunity to study there for about a year. And I was deeply informed by coercion theory, which it's also within social learning theory. But what it does is it expands our understanding of the challenge that families face in regard to changing their child's behavior if they've gotten into a pattern of problem behavior. Because whereas a functional assessment teaches us that when the child engages in the problem behavior, and the parent inadvertently reinforces it. For example, a parent makes a demand, the child behaves with problem behavior, and then the parent withdraws the demand. The parent has negatively reinforced the problem behavior. But what a functional assessment doesn't tell us is what happens next, which is when the parent gives in to the child, when the parent, for example, withdraws that demand, for example, brush your teeth, eat some healthy food, let's get dressed in the morning, the child stops engaging in problem behavior. And so because we are all influenced by the laws of behavior, the parent is also experiencing negative reinforcement because they are getting a better situation when they give in to the child. The problem behavior goes away. When that happens again and again and again, you have what's called a coercive process developing, where the child is using problem behavior to change the behavior of the parent. And that can get locked in and become automatic. And once it does, it's really hard to change. And that's what Dr. Patterson has brought to our attention. It's really important to know that, because it's a challenge that we face when we want to help parents change their behavior and improve their child's behavior and their family's quality of life. But also, we also integrated into family-centered PBS ecocultural theory. This is from the work of Ronald Gallimore from the University of California, Los Angeles, also Roland Tharp, who I believe he may be retired now, but he was at the University of California at Santa Cruz. Roland Tharp is a cultural anthropologist, and I'm sorry, Ronald Gallimore is a cultural anthropologist, and Roland Tharp is a clinical psychologist. And ecocultural theory is a way of looking at child development in the family, and it's been developed over many decades through research by cultural anthropologists. And the theory says that children develop in the context of family activity settings or routines. And what mediates their development is their interaction with their family members. And when that interaction is really constructive and healthy, the child not naturally develops, moves toward more adaptive behavior, more skills, more cognitive complexity. And so we, very early in the process of developing family-centered PBS, saw these three theories as an opportunity to possibly really create an approach to PBS with families that could lead to really meaningful, durable, and sustainable change. And so family-centered PBS is essentially an integration of these three theoretical frameworks. And it reflects one important feature of a PBS approach, which is openness to multiple theoretical perspectives. It's my view that applied behavior analysis is a necessary condition to promote meaningful, durable, and sustainable improvements in child behavior and family quality of life. But I do not believe it is a sufficient condition. And it's our research over 30 years that have suggested to us that when we add coercion theory and ecocultural theory and integrate that with behavioral theory, we move closer to the opportunity to create transformational change. And I'll show you something about that as we move on. So the aim of... Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, just to say that our first keyword for the CEUs is theory. Our first keyword for the CEU is theory.
Wonderful, thank you. A powerful word indeed. So the aim of PBS is we implement family-centered positive behavior support. We then work toward, in this work, we create survivable interventions developed in collaboration with the family, and I'll define that in a moment, what survivable interventions are. And when we do that, it leads to transformational change in child and family lives. That's our aim, to implement family-centered PBS. In that process, develop survival interventions in collaboration with the family, and then our hypothesis and some of our experience, to a fair extent, is transformational change in child and family lives. Now, you'll notice I've used a triangle, a square, a triangle, and a circle. And I'm going to make a metaphor right now, which I found rather interesting. I just did this as I was developing this presentation. I've always been fascinated by this Sumier painting, which is hundreds of years old. It's a Zen painting. It's very famous within Zen Buddhism in Japan. It's always been something very interesting to me. I have it on my wall in my office. And then I did some internet search to see whether there was any meaning. Did you, Thanos, do you have something you wanted to add?
No, I didn't say anything. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Well, notice, so I said, is there any meaning to the square, the triangle, and the circle? And when I did the search, I said, this is really interesting. And so please bear with me for a moment. The square represents intellect and mission. The triangle represents life in perfection, the perfection of life. And the circle represents beauty, solid. And so I thought about that for a moment. Let's go back here. Intellect, mission, family-centered PBS is based on deep intellectual thought, right, theory. And there's a mission, right? It has a mission to improve families, child behavior, and family life. The survivable intervention, when it's developed, it is a representation of families living their life and doing things with their children that can lead to, well, one cannot say so much perfection, but moving in that direction, where they have a vision of the way they want their family life to be, and they work toward achieving that vision. And then the transformational change, one can argue that when families do change in a transformational way, there's a quality of beauty to it. Families will not say to you, wow, I love the fact that I'm using these 10 applied behavior analytic strategies during dinner. They'll say, our dinner routine is beautiful. It's wonderful. They'll use a more poetic language, but they're using the strategies with great fidelity. And one can consider that the word solid could be another way of talking about durability. It's strong, it's durable, it's sustainable. So I thought that was interesting. So please forgive me for indulging in my attempt to add a little poetry to our deeply scientific work. But I thought that was interesting. So what is the survivable intervention? I was deeply influenced by a preface to a book written in the 1970s, or no, actually in the 1980s, about instructional technology for children with severe disabilities. I'm certified as a teacher of children with severe disabilities. I've worked in classrooms for years teaching students with severe intellectual disabilities. And in this preface to this book on instructional technology, Donald Baer said, the most important thing in our work as behavior analysts is to create survivable interventions. And what does a survivable intervention mean? It means that when you go away, whoever the natural agent of change is, whether it's a teacher or a parent, group home staff, they can continue to use our technology with fidelity and maintain those changes that we helped start. And then he said, if you really believe that survivability is the most important thing we should be working toward, then the corollary to that is that we have to value social validity. And we have to really pay attention all along the way through our introduction to folks in a home or in a school, in our way of doing our assessment, in the way of building our interventions, in the way of providing implementation support, in evaluation. Everything we do, from the consumer's point of view, from the teacher's point of view, from the parent's point of view, needs to be acceptable and important and feasible from their point of view. And if we don't do that, the likelihood of survivability has been decreased. And so that made a deep impression on me. and the colleagues I've been working with as we developed family-centered PBS. And so here are the qualities of survivable intervention. It's acceptable. Those who are going to be implementing those strategies, let's keep the focus on families because that's the focus of this talk. It's acceptable to the family. The father and the mother say, yeah, these strategies are acceptable. It's feasible. They'll also see the strategy, maybe watch you do it or get a clear explanation of it, read it clearly because you wrote it clearly in non-jargon terms, and they say, yeah, I can do that. And then when they do it, it's effective. It actually improves the child's behavior, and they can see that. And then when they do it over time, they don't feel like, oh my goodness, this is so much burden for me. How could I keep this going? They actually feel like, hey, it's sustainable. I can do this in my life. I can do this during dinner time. I can do this during transitions out of the home. I can do it during our bedtime routine. I can do it during our morning routine. It's sustainable. And then when they sustain it, the change is durable. You go away, and because the strategies, the plan you develop with the family is acceptable, feasible, effective, and sustainable, the changes endure. And I'm not talking about endurance for a few weeks or a few months, which most of our research, that's the evidence we have. If you look at the follow-up data that's gathered in the field of behavior analysis or even positive behavior support, no one goes far beyond a few months. So what's durability to a family? I would submit to you that it's not weeks or months, but it's months and years. And I would emphasize years. And so that's what we've been aiming toward. Interventions that survive for years, because families don't live their lives in days, weeks, and months. They live their lives together in years and decades. So what is transformational change? The Webster Dictionary defines it as the change in composition or structure, implies a major change in form, nature, or function, to change one thing to another. And so back to a metaphor, to change one thing. A caterpillar doesn't change into a butterfly, it transforms into a butterfly, meaning once it becomes a butterfly, it can't go back to being a caterpillar. So can we do this as humans, as people? So in human terms, I think Oliver Wendell Holmes, an American jurist, came close to what that might look like cognitively or intellectually. One's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions. And so can we work with families in such a way that we empower them with our knowledge of behavior analysis embedded within their lives, within their family routines, in such a way that once we stretch their minds to the use of positive behavior support and the meaning of it, that they understand, they will never go back to other ways of parenting that have led to problem behavior. Can we do that? So here's some of the lessons we learned as we attempted to understand that for the past 30 years. So this is about building survivable interventions and promoting transformational change. So the first lesson we learned is it's important to supplement the functional assessment with a coercive process assessment. Again, a functional assessment is important, we all know that. But if you really look at it in terms of the social ecology of the family, it only goes as far as the third step of a coercive process. It tells us the effect of the parent on the child, but it doesn't tell us the effect of the child on the parent, and there are child effects. And if we don't recognize, this is what Dr. Patterson has taught us over his 40 years of research. If we don't pay attention to the effect of the child on the parent over time, we are missing 1/4 of the puzzle, 1/4 of the phenomena that's occurring in the home. So imagine that someone said to you, there's a problem with 4 parts, and I'm going to give you a way of doing assessment that gives you the first 3 parts, and you're on your own for the 4th part. You can recognize it or not. It's up to you. I'm not going to say anything about it. How far do you think you're going to get in terms of survival interventions? And I would suggest to you that you won't get too far. And if you really look at the research we've been doing and the lack of long-term follow-up, we don't really know. There's not a whole lot of evidence of the long-term durability of applied behavior analytic strategies used by parents in the home. Because of the nerd that I am, at one point I did an analysis of 10 years of JABA studies only 5% were families, and very few of them gathered long-term follow-up data beyond a year. And so this is the message Sherry Patterson has taught me and my colleagues. You best do a coercive process assessment too to see the effect of the child on the parent and bring that to the parent's attention in a very positive, non-blaming, supportive way. Because if you don't know that this is happening, what can you do? Families just don't know that there is this child effect on them. And to enhance contextual fit, conduct a family ecology assessment. And so we developed a family ecology assessment with other colleagues. We received input when we were developing an assessment from Ann Turnbull, Rob Horner, Glenn Dunlap, George Singer, all of whom contributed to our thinking on this. And I'll share it to you shortly, but it basically looks at the larger ecology of the family that goes beyond what you would get out of a functional assessment. And it gives you information that can help you do two things. One, see other parts of the family ecology relevant to developing a contextually appropriate plan, but also see other parts of the family ecology such that you may recognize the need for family-centered supports that go beyond just focusing on the child. And three, during implementation support, embody a collaborative model of parent training and support. You might have heard of the term Therapeutic Alliance. I did a lot of study with clinical and counseling psychologists when I was in my doctoral program. I continue to work closely with clinical and counseling psychologists in my work. And one of the major messages from that discipline, and some of you may be clinical psychologists, so you're the Buddha, I'm learning from you, is that the Therapeutic Alliance is essential to promote meaningful, durable, and sustainable change. And so embodying a collaborative model of parent training and support can help you establish that therapeutic alliance. So number one, let's look into that. Supplement the functional assessment with a coercive process assessment. So our aim is to teach family members about coercive processes operating between the parent and child. And these are typical processes of parent-child interaction that reinforce child problem behavior in an effective parenting practice. And we also want to empower parents to build constructive processes of interaction. And our procedure is, after completing a functional assessment, we conduct a coercive process assessment. We identify coercive processes operating between the parent and child. We identify constructive processes to replace those coercive processes. That's an aspirational process. And we actually present this as a diagram and review it with the family. But we also emphasize the normative nature of coercive processes before behavior support. We do not do this in a way that suggests, oh, look at this dysfunction in your family. We do not in any way communicate this knowledge in that way. We say, this is something that is natural, that happens in family life before we have this knowledge. And in fact, when these coercive processes develop, there's actually a quality of compassion that is operating too, and a process of love that's operating too, because a family's main responsibility is to care for their child and not allow their child to suffer. And many parents, when the children is tantruming, engaging in self-injury, that's suffering. And when the parent gives in to the child, when the parent backs off, gives the child the attention they want, gives them the item they want, that problem behavior ends, that suffering ends. And so in some ways, parents are meeting their duty, but by doing it after the problem, there's a short-term gain, a decrease in problem behavior, but a long-term problem, which is the problem behavior will never go away. It'll probably become more intransigent. And I've engaged in qualitative interviews about this coercive process in families, and I've asked families, and this is part of the first study we did when we revealed this, that mothers told me that, no one's ever brought this to our attention. And so if I don't have tools to change this process of interaction with my child, and I try and tackle these issues on my own without the proper tools, I could create so much stress in my family that maybe my family will fall apart. And so I'm going to continue to give into my child to tap down the stress in our home until someone comes into my home and really shows me how to overcome this. And so that's a very interesting point of view. And then I'll illustrate this with a child functional assessment results for a morning routine that we recently did in a study. June is a 5-year-old boy with autism. I'm going to show you a summary hypothesis statement and a competing behavior pathways diagram, which is basically the 4-part contingency with an ecological understanding of applied behavior analysis. So this is June. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, just to say that our second keyword is family. If you're collecting CEUs, our second keyword is family. Thank you.
Thank you. So June is 5 years old. He has autism. His mother's Japanese, his father's Canadian, and they have a 3-year-old daughter as well. And the target routine was a morning routine, getting up and ready for school. And our functional behavior analysis summary hypothesis looks like this. When requests or demands to do non-preferred or difficult tasks in the morning were given by the mother, or she tried to provide physical assistance, the child would non-comply, leave his assigned area, or physically resist. The mother would then remove the request or demand, and the child would escape. And that thus would negatively reinforce those problem behaviors. Now, the setting events that set the stage for this to increase the value of escape were the routine begins before June is fully awake, and so it's hard to respond to requests and demands when you're still sleepy. Also, there was a lack of predictability because of his autism. He couldn't predict what was going to happen across the morning routine, and so he wasn't quite invested in it. And he wasn't given any choices. The mother didn't understand the value of choice as a way of decreasing the natural versus of someone telling you what to do. And of course, families don't know this, and so, but there was no choice being offered to him. So that was our functional assessment. You can see it's quite simple, but that's what we often find in any given routine. The behavior analytic understanding of it is quite simple, but also quite powerful in its simplicity. Then we add the competing behavior aspects of it. The desired behavior for the parent is completing the morning routine, and the maintaining consequence, theoretically, is going to be praise and a preferred item or activity, which we would then think through with the parent, what would that look like? The alternate replacement behavior, also technically the functionally equivalent behavior, could be the child learning to ask for a delay, asking for a break or help. And that also can get escape. The break and delay gives escape, but the help decreases the difficulty of the task. And so that also is a form of negative reinforcement. You decrease task difficulty when you ask for help. So that's the competing behavior pathways diagram. This is an example of ecological behavior analysis because we're looking at the way in which behaviors compete at any given moment, and we understand why problem behavior is winning the competition when we arrive, and our job is to make the desired behavior eventually win the competition in regard to what the child's going to do in the morning routine. But now we do the coercive process assessment. So this is what the behavior analysis taught, behavior assessment taught us. There's a request, demand, and physical assistance from the mom. The child June engages in problem behavior, and the mom withdraws the request, the demand, and provides physical assistance. In fact, what was happening when we arrived is the boy was going to his preschool in his pajamas because he wouldn't take them off, and she couldn't get him to take them off and put on his street clothes. And, the boy's 5 years old. The mother's thinking, well, I guess it's okay. But, how is that going to be okay when he's 10, when he's 15 years old? Maybe for one day a week in high school when they have pajama day, but not 195 days a year. And so you can see that this is a bit of an issue. But the coercive process gives us the next step, the coercive process assessment. The child terminates or reduces problem behavior. In fact, what we see is the moment the parent backs off and does the task for him or simply gives up, he immediately stops engaging in problem behavior. So you can see that it's quite operant. He knows what's going on. He knows that he's he has this control. Problem behavior is very effective for him. So that's the full 4-part process. And we brought this to the family's attention. But then aspirationally, we sat down with the family and said, what would a constructive process look like? Request, demand, physical assistance, okay. But in this case, the parent is showing the child how to get dressed, not doing it for him, but showing him through physical prompts and other prompts how to get dressed. Then the child complies and cooperates. Compliance means he does the task. Cooperate means when the mother is showing him how to do it, he's cooperating with her, he's learning. And then the parent provides some form of positive attention and tangible reinforcer to strengthen that compliance cooperation, and then the child continues task engagement. That would be the constructive process we're working toward creating, building. And so that's the coercive processes I've been. Now, the second key thing we learned about promoting transformational change is to enhance contextual fit, conduct a family ecology assessment. And there's 2 parts, a broad assessment of family ecology and a focused assessment of family routines. And so our aims is to establish a strengths-based perspective of the child and family, build trust and nurture hope, identify and define target routines for intervention support, increase contextual fit with these target routines and also with family life, but also identify family-focused supports that may be necessary to improve quality of life. For example, there may be a need for sibling support or marital support if the families are arguing with each other about how to support the child, or if the father isn't valuing the mother or the mother isn't valuing the father in a way that interferes with parenting and their quality of life. So these are the questions we ask. The first question we ask is, what would you characterize as your family strengths? Now, no family is going to listen to that question right off the bat and say, oh, thank you for asking. I have 7 strengths. They fall into 3 categories. This requires interview skills because families probably aren't even aware of their strengths. And so you basically are having a conversation, and through interview skills and asking follow-up questions and providing examples perhaps from your own family or from other families you've worked with, you can begin to draw out an understanding of family strengths. What would you characterize as your son or daughter's positive contributions to the family? The purpose of this question is to help the parent recognize that you believe in their child, in the family. You don't see them as dysfunctional. You don't see the child as just a problem. That you recognize that it's very likely the child makes some positive contributions to the family. And often those are of an intangible nature. These are things that researchers have found through their studies of families of kids with disability, that they have strengths, lots of strengths. And these children, despite their challenges, also make positive contributions to the family. We want to bring that to the surface and build on those. We also ask, what are formal and informal resources you've used or are available to help your son or daughter develop and improve, and also to improve your quality of life? For example, are there extended family members who can support you? Are there respite services available in your community that you can access if you're not accessing? Are there funds available to families of kids with disability that are available, but you have to write out a form and submit it to your provincial or local government or city government to be able to get those funds, but you're not accessing that? What are these resources? Can we use them? Also, what are sources of stress? And we ask it in 3 ways. How is a child's behavior affecting you? How is a child's behavior affecting your child as a whole, your family as a whole? How is a child's behavior affecting your family as a whole? And 3, are there any other stressors in your family that would make it challenging for you to do this work of supporting your child using a multi-component positive behavior support plan? And that's where the family might be willing to reveal you at the time. There's some sibling issues. There's some marital issues. They're just exhausted and they need respite care, but they're not getting it yet. And those are important things to know. Because if you don't respond to those aspects of family stress that go beyond the child with disability, you're not going to be able to build meaningful, durable, and sustainable change. And finally, we ask, what are your goals for your son or daughter with disability and your family as a whole? Now, you may ask, why do we ask that question last? Most people begin with that question. The reason why we asked that question last is we have found, and it's probably okay to ask it first too, but what we have found is that for these families with kids with very severe problem behavior that's been going on for months or years, they have often lost a sense of hope. They don't know what they can do. They may not believe they can do anything. And the first 4 questions we ask is almost like tilling the soil of their life. It's hardened. You can't plant the seed into it, a seed of change. And by asking these questions, the family begins to open up to the possibility of change. As I said, if this interview is done well, using really good clinical interviewing skills and relationship development skills, you'll see an increase in family hope. You'll see a movement toward trust, a willingness to form a therapeutic alliance. And then we say, okay, what can we do? And then the family might say, do you think we might be able to actually have a nice dinner together? Or I can actually go to the store with my child and not be a disaster? And then we think through family goals for the child, but also for the family as a whole. That then leads to this next part of the assessment, where we ask about the child's daily schedule during the week and the weekend. We talk about home routines in which problem behaviors typically occur, community routines in which problem behaviors typically occur, and then we look at the family's priority for improvement. Like, what would be some home routines that would really be important for you to improve? What would be some community routines that would be really important for you to improve? And then we prioritize and we decide together where to begin. And I actually visited Dr. Patterson and Marion Forgatch a few years ago at their home in Eugene, Oregon with my wife, Yoko. And I asked them this question, Marion and Jerry, if you were me or you were doing this work in family-centered PBS and you have this family with a child with disability and very severe problem behavior, it's been going on for months and years, the coercive processes are really deeply embedded, they're not going to be easy to change, where would you begin? Would you begin with the easiest routine that you could identify for change, or would you pick a routine that's like pivotal? It's going to be tough, but if you can change this routine, lots of things will change. And they said unequivocally, start with the easiest routine. Because the most important thing for you is to help that family develop a sense of self-efficacy, that they know that they use these strategies and this routine is now working and they did it. You didn't do it, they did it. That's the most important thing to do right off the bat when you start this work. And so I would argue that once you do this assessment, use your own clinical judgment and dialogue with the family to find the easiest routine to change and get that change started, and make sure you attribute that change to the family, not to you. And if you have, a need to, attend to your own sense of professional competence and identity as a behavior analysis, and you need to somehow integrate that into your work, I would suggest to you you're integrating in something to work that might interfere with the family's development of their own sense of self-efficacy. Because if you communicate in any way, subtly, indirectly, or directly, that this is about you and your ability as a behavior analyst, you may then make it difficult for the family to see that it's they who used the strategies and they who promoted the change. So I do believe that the lowering the mask of ego in this work is really important if you really want to build self-efficacy in the folks with whom you work. And then we prioritize. Where will we begin? Where will we go next? We'll actually prioritize the routines we're going to work on. So procedure: before or after FBA, conduct a family ecology assessment in collaboration with the family, select and prioritize target family routines, and define a vision of successful routine. So it's their vision. And all routines have these qualities, no matter where you are on the planet. There's a time and place, there's people involved, there are resources they're going to use, there are tasks that everyone in that routine has got to do, including the child with disability, and there's goals and values, which are the subjective aspects of the routine. And using that framework, the family then creates a vision of a successful routine. And your job is to make sure the routine is also realistic. We don't want a pie in the sky routine, we want a routine that actually is realistic, all things considered. So you have a voice too in forming that routine, but it is ultimately the family's vision. And then we use the family ecology results to ensure the plan builds on family and child strengths, incorporates family resources, diminishes stressors, and addresses the family's goals for the child. Contextually appropriate plan in addition to being technically sound. And to promote generalization, we select 2 or 3 target routines that are different in terms of setting, function, tasks, and people. Now I'm going to illustrate this because this is a study we're about to send forth to a journal. So we worked with this family from Taiwan on a dinner routine and a play with brother routine. The child, who was a focus child, a 5-year-old girl with autism, she was fairly high functioning, but quite reticent in her use of speech and used problem behavior throughout the day to arrange things in a way that made her feel most comfortable. She didn't join dinner. All she ate was noodles, nothing else. And her brother and her couldn't be together for more than 10 minutes without starting to fight when they were in a room with toys. So those were the 2 routines we worked on. And after those routines were successful, and all we did was work on those 2 routines and no other routines, the family informed us that they could now have breakfast together, no problem. They could go to a restaurant, and the child was fine eating the food that was served at the restaurant. They were able to send a lunch in, and the teacher reported she's eating her lunch, no problem. And then the mother decided, I've learned a lot about how to support my child in these 2 routines. I'm going to try and overcome a problem on my own, which is washing hair and brushing hair, because it would always be fits and tears and tantrums when the mother tried to wash her daughter's hair and comb it out after the bath. And she succeeded on her own. So what you see is we worked on these 2 routines, and just serendipitously, they appeared to promote generalization to other home routines. But then, and again, we're doing longitudinal work, and we keep asking family what else is changing. They informed us, I'm sorry, the home routine, the middle one is lunchtime. They were able to have lunch together. Then they told us they were able to go to a restaurant, and they had never been able to do that before, and have a nice meal at a restaurant. They were able to take her shopping, and there weren't any problem behaviors. And then they said, let's do something we could not have imagined. Let's enroll her in a regular swimming class at our community center, and just, cross our fingers. She did fine. She was completely appropriate and responsive to the teacher at the community center's swimming pool during swimming lessons. Then they said, and this is going across a couple of years of follow-up. So we're coming back, collecting some data, but also interviewing them on what else is going on. They said, we decided to go on a camping trip. We could never do that. They had a wonderful time. And then they said, okay, let's do this. Let's enroll her in a summer camp with typically developing kids. And she went to the summer camp. She was fine. She listened to the counselor. She integrated with the children. It worked. And then they said, let's do something really hard. I mean, the last time we went to, I'm speaking in the voice of the family, the last time we went to Disneyland, it was a disaster. It was just so bad. We never want to go again. Because of her problem behavior during the trip. So they said, let's try. They went to the Disneyland. They had a wonderful time. She was flexible. She enjoyed herself. She was not rigidly demanding this or that or the other. And so you can see this, we just worked on 2 routines. In the course of 2 years of follow-up, they informed us that all of these other changes occurred because they had mastered the strategies, they had implemented them with fidelity, and they saw their value throughout their life. And finally, and this is really interesting to me, during this interview where we were asking the parents about other things that had happened, collateral effects, the mother informed me that she is totally delighted, more than happy, because her daughter now recognizes her identity as a girl. Now she's 7 years old, and she wants to be a girl. And it turns out that, girls can play lots of different roles in life. She decided she wants to be a girly girl. And now she wants to learn about makeup and fingernail polish and, putting your hair up with those little round things. And the mother was beside herself with joy because now she can teach her daughter to be a girl, which she just could not have imagined before. And so that's identity. That's how far they got in terms of promoting meaningful, durable, sustainable change. And you can see that this is an example of transformational change. I could share with you other such examples. This is just one of several through the work of family-centered PBS, but I think this is a pretty compelling example. And when I said we did interviews, we did a qualitative study. These were rigorous qualitative-based questions, and we went ahead and did member checks. We did peer review of our qualitative data. So this isn't simply anecdotal data. This is rigorous qualitative data that I'm sharing you in a pictorial way. So third, during implementation support, embody a collaborative model of parent training and support. So this is some really important quotes on the keys to really good implementation support by Duns, Trivet, and Deal in their book on enabling empowering families. We have increasingly come to realize that it's not simply the provision of support that promotes competent functioning, but the manner in which help is provided that has positive or negative consequences. And also Carolyn Webster Stratton has much to say too about parent training as collaboration. With a root meaning of to labor together, collaboration implies a reciprocal relationship based on utilizing equally the therapist's and the parent's knowledge, strengths, and perspectives. A collaborative model of parent training is non-blaming and non-hierarchical. And this quote, I think, is one you can live by. It's incredibly powerful when you can embody that meaning of that quote when you're working with families. And
because I started being so casual with you. I get drunk so easily, and I also think we should call each other on first name basis.
Seems like someone accidentally unmuted themselves. Let me sort it out. All right.
Can I go on?
Yes, I think. Sorry about that. Probably accidentally unmuted themselves.
That's okay. Yeah. So parent training as collaboration. This is also a quote from parent. I really encourage you to read the work of Carolyn Webster Stratton. It's brilliant work. She does brilliant work with families. The collaborative therapist labors with parents by actively soliciting their ideas and feelings, understanding their cultural context, and involving them in the therapeutic process by inviting them to share their experience, discuss their ideas, engage in problem solving. This is how you go about doing family-centered PBS. These are words to live by if you really want to achieve survivable interventions in transformational change. So Anne Turnbull and her colleagues, Blue Banning, did a qualitative study to understand what are the features of collaborative partnership from the points of view of parents and professionals. And they discovered 6 features: communication, real clear, open communication, committed by everyone to a process of change that's meaningful to everyone. Equality, that the interactions between professionals and the family has features of equality, not someone saying I'm the boss or I am the expert, you're the supplicant, the follower. But there's equality. Also skills. People need to be skilled. You do have to be a stone behavior analyst. You really have to understand what's going on from a behavior analytic point of view, but you also need skills of a clinical nature, which I think behavior analysts like to call soft skills, but I would suggest that those are the harder skills to develop. Like, how do you truly listen? Because listening is a therapeutic, has therapeutic import. How do you truly collaborate? Collaborate is a skill. How do you truly empower? Parent training from an empowerment perspective is a different way of parent training. It's more than just behavioral skills training when you take an empowerment point of view. If you read the work of Julian Rappaport, the father of empowerment theory, you'll see that when you work from an empowerment perspective, you are doing things differently than from an expert model. So you need lots of skill. And also trust. There really has to be trust between you and the family. They have to really, particularly when you're taking them through a coercive process, you're bringing up their attention and you're helping them get to the other side of it, to a constructive process. It isn't easy because they've been negatively reinforced so many times, right? They've fallen into the reinforcement track so many times that it's comfortable, right? The problem behavior goes away right away, or maybe it doesn't come back because they just don't do that routine anymore. That's the most insidious effect of a coercive process. They just don't go to the grocery store anymore. They don't put the child to bed. The child sleeps with the parent, even though they're 8 years old now. They don't come to the dinner table. They graze all day. They never go on vacations because they don't want to experience all the stress. That's the insidious effect of a powerful coercive process. So helping parents get to the other side requires lots of trust and also respect. It's really important that in every breath and every aspect of your presentation, both verbal and nonverbal, the way you look, the stance you take, the thoughts you have, the feelings you express to the family, you communicate respect. And there's so many ways on a subtle level not to do that. So one has to be quite self-aware and self-reflective and self-critical as you move toward truly embodying the concept of respect and showing that in every way to the family. Because when you do that, you reciprocally open the opportunity for respect from the family, and that trust and that respect then leads to the real hard work of change, which then leads to transformational change. So here are the outcomes associated with a collaborative parent training model. And this is from the work of Brookman-Frazee, my work, also Webster-Stratton. You get a reduction in attrition, you get increased motivation to commit to change, increased confidence and sense of self-efficacy by the family, increase in intervention fidelity, increase in maintenance and generalization, decrease in parental stress, and increase in child skills and happiness. These are the things that researchers who have been focused on a collaborative model of parent training have discovered through their research. And so I think it's really important to take that to heart. I'm going to illustrate this with one family. This is a family that we worked with, another Taiwanese family that also promoted transformational change in their life. And this is what they said about collaboration with an interventionist who was my graduate student during a study that I was doing.
Hi, Joe. It seems that the sound is not coming through from the video.
Oh, it's not coming through the video.
Yeah, the sound is not coming through. I think it might be tricky to get it to work now. I think it needs some tweaking of the settings for your sound to come through if you're playing a video. So perhaps you could just quickly go over what the video is about.
Maybe what do you want me to say what she's saying, or should I just tell you what should I just skip it?
Well, I think, yeah, maybe if you just give us a quick overview of, you know, what the video, you know, what's like the message from the video, because I don't think we're going to be able to hear the video.
I understand. I'll stop this. The parent is saying, Christy, our behavior consultant, it was one of the most wonderful experiences of our life. She was very respectful. She didn't push us. She was very patient. You know, the mother says, you know, we're human, we make mistakes. You know, we're not robots. It takes us time to, you know, learn these new strategies. They were quite unique to us because they're nothing that we'd seen in our own Taiwanese culture and ways of parenting, but she was very patient. We at the beginning, we failed many times, but she kept saying, you know, no, you know, it was better this time, you know, than last time. And so she was, you know, really encouraging as we took baby steps toward change. And then it led to, I've seen this video so many times that I can almost quote it to you. Empowerment. We are empowered. We can support our child. And it's a wonderful thing. And we thank our behavior consultant, Christy, for her support. That's essentially what they're saying.
Thanks for that. That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
I'm sorry that the video can't be heard. But here's a quote. I end with this quote. This is the last slide before the references. This is a quote that I think in a poetic way really characterizes what we're doing. Cultivating a Flourishing Family Life by Jim Robin. Your family and your love must be cultivated like a garden. Time, effort, and imagination must be summoned constantly to keep any relationship flourishing and growing. Now, really think about that. You can turn that into technical behavior analytic language, right? Because these families take the time, they make the effort, they use your imagination, and you use it with them. You know, to create a positive behavior support plan is in some ways it's imaginative effort informed by science. Creating a vision of a cyclical routine is indeed an imaginative effort. But for that routine, for the family life to flourish, you have to constantly keep working at it. The family says that in the video. They say, you know, what we learned is we've got to do this every day. It's not a cure. It's not you come and fix my child. No, it's up to us. We have to do it every day. And interestingly enough, in my conversations with this mother, who was very poetic in the way she talked about her work role as a parent, she said this, which is very interesting because it's very much like this quote. She said, you know, our work in positive behavior support and all of the routines we were able to create through this work, and I wouldn't say we created a forest, but I think we created a garden, a really lovely garden, and we're doing our best to water it and keep it growing. I mean, that's a near quote of how she described her life. And so I think it's really important, and I say this as a behavior analyst, that we have to learn not to just talk in the language of science, but the language of poetry if we want to communicate our knowledge to families. This mother has communicated to me, for example, her understanding of positive contingency statements, like if after you do this, this good thing will happen, which then encourages the child to do it, right? That's a positive contingency statement. That's a technical term. But the mother will say this, you know, when I make my promise to my daughter, I keep it. And then because I keep my promise, she trusts me. That's a non-technical poetic way about talking about when I state a positive contingency and I follow through with the reinforcer that I stated, I develop stimulus control. So the next time I use a contingency, I will be able to occasion the behavior that I was part of the contingency. So you can say it both ways. My point to you is attend to the poetry. That's going to really help you be effective with families. So thank you very much. There's a reference list here. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And also I can give you the tools for those three things. We've developed a addendum to the functional assessment, the coercive process assessment. I have the tools for doing the family ecology assessment and a guidance for doing it. And I also have a self-evaluation form for developing your ability to be a true collaborative partner. And so if you're interested in these tools, I'm more than happy to share them with you.
Joe, thank you very, very much. I was really excited to be hosting you today. I've read your work and I knew that we were in for a treat. The comprehensive approach to supporting families is, I think, the future and the way to go. So it's really encouraging to see researchers like yourself disseminating what I personally consider is to be best practice. If there are any questions from our audience, oh, I've got one coming through. It's more of a comment, really insightful session. Thank you so much. You have given me some insight into two new theories that will hopefully enhance the effectiveness of PBS. As an advisor and also a mom to a toddler, I love your empathetic way of explaining the coercion theory and about parents responding to challenging behavior in a way that stops suffering and meets a duty as a parent. Such an innate feeling to keep your child safe. Access to the tools would be amazing. How would we go about this? And there are a couple of other people that would be really keen and interested to get their hands on the tools that you mentioned, Joe. So what would be the best way? Would you like?
I'll just say I have done this presentation more than once, in different variations. And I have the tools in a package. I have them in a PDF, and I can also send them as a Word. And just so you, regarding the Coercive Process assessment, if you use it, and I actually, just to give you some comfort, it gives me comfort, I shared it with Dr. Horner, who's still my mentor. I mean, he'll be my mentor for the rest of my life. I just value his insight and wisdom. But I shared it with him, and he gave his stamp of approval. So I think it's okay. But if you use the Coercive Process addendum, and you can give me some feedback, it would be really nice to know, because it is really novel. It's really out of the radar of most behavior analysts. You should know that most behavior analysts do not recognize this fourth step. I think it's something we need to attend to. But if you do use the Coercive Process assessment, which is an addendum to the functional assessment interview by O'Neill et al. 2015, I'd really, appreciate getting any feedback, even critical feedback. It was awful, I hated it, I never want to do it again. That's important for me to hear too, although I hope that isn't what results from its use.
So perhaps you can send me
send
the
it to you,
PDF.
absolutely, no problem.
Okay, so maybe send me that PDF, Joe, and I can share it along with your slides, perhaps? Would that
Yeah,
work?
absolutely, I'll do it right away.
Excellent. Guys, the third keyword for today is tools. Since we're discussing the tools that Joe will be sharing, the third keyword for your CEU is tools. I've got another comment, Joe. I really enjoyed the presentation as a whole. I was wondering about your research with respect to mindfulness. There are several different conceptualizations of mindfulness. Singh used a second generation Buddhist derived intervention, which is distinctly different to the conceptualization of mindfulness in acceptance and commitment therapy. And in mindfulness-based stress reduction, which do you favor and do you think it matters? So it's basically about the different, I suppose, iterations of mindfulness-based approaches. Is there one, Joe, that you favor over others, or?
That is a wonderful question, and I'm just I'm too deeply connected to the very question you asked to be able to give you an unbiased or deeply personal point of view. So it's okay if I give you a deeply personal point of view. I'm asking permission to
go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So I have a mindfulness practice I've been doing for 40 years. I do what's called Zazen. I've lived in Japan for 4 years. I studied with a Zen master there for 4 years. I continue to study with a Zen master. Interesting enough, over Zoom. And so I sit every morning for 20 minutes. I do what's called Zazen. It's a form of sitting meditation. I basically sit in a half lotus position for 20 minutes in the morning. I'm supposed to be also doing it for 10 minutes in the evening, but somehow Netflix competes with that, but I'm still working on it. And I've been doing this for 43 years. Now, I've talked to Stephen Hayes decades ago when he first began to share us with the knowledge of ACT. And I asked him, I had just come back from Japan, and I asked him, Steve, when I look at your book and listen to you talk, it sounds a lot like aspects of Zen Buddhism. And he said, well, actually, yeah, I went to Japan. I studied at a Zen temple for 3 years, and I decided that I was going to try and take the knowledge I learned and translate it into sort of an American idiom, like a North American way of thinking about it. And because North Americans are quite cognitive, I didn't think anyone's going to be sitting, facing a wall for, 6 hours a day like they do at this monastery. So I figured some other ways out for getting folks who are North American to begin practicing mindfulness. So think about that. That's interesting to me. And also, I know that the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, Jon Kabat-Zinn, I also know that he went to Japan. He studied with some Zen teachers, and he also brought back what he learned, because the core practice that he teaches, the sitting meditation, is essentially Zazen. He describes exactly what I was taught to do 43 years ago. And it's interesting enough, he recently presented, I think, somewhere in Europe with my current teacher. And so I say that to be transparent when I say that I teach. Right now, I have incorporated mindfulness into parent training. I consider it a universal support to families. I explain it in the great strength that John Kabat-Zinn and Stephen Hayes has brought us is they've taken these practices that come out of Eastern traditions that have a religious sort of taint or connection, and brought them into our secular world. And now they're a science-based practice. And there's been so many studies done, I mean, easily hundreds of studies done in the field of clinical psychology now, also and increasingly in the field of disability, like the work of Nirbhay Singh, to show us that if we can teach parents a mindfulness practice, it really, really helps them lower their stress, improve their self-care, and also improve the relationship with a child with disability or with a behavior disorder. And so I teach 3 mindfulness practices to my students, and I teach it to those parents who, when I describe the practices, they give their assent to learn this as part of our PBS process. The first practice I teach is a sitting meditation. The second practice I teach is a walking meditation, but in a way that doesn't make you look weird, when you're walking in the community, because if you see the natural walking meditation that's done in monasteries in the East, it's very formal. It would make you stand out. But if you just walk naturally and pay attention to everything around you in a mindful way, that becomes a meditation. And the third meditation I teach is called a loving kindness practice, which actually comes out of Tibetan Buddhism. It's easily over 1,000 years old, this thing called a loving kindness practice, and the Dalai Lama teaches this too in some of his writings. And the reason why I teach those 3, there's a fourth one called a compassion abiding practice too, which I might introduce if parents are willing. And I learned that from Dr. Singh. The mindfulness practice, if you can do it 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning, really, really sets your day in terms of your well-being and being able to be present in the moment and responsive to it. The walking meditation, I found families really taking to, because people have to walk. You have to walk to your car, you have to walk down the stairs, you got to walk to your office, you have to walk your dog. And I have found families really liking that because they walk. And if they can turn their walking into a meditation, a mindfulness practice, then there's all this additional benefit. I'm now doing a study with a Japanese mother of a child with autism who has an anxiety disorder. The mother also has a bit of an anxiety issue, and we're finishing up the study now, and the results are quite wonderful. But the mother informs me that the walking meditation has been incredibly helpful to her. She's calmer now. She has less fear. She's just mastered the behavior support strategies brilliantly, and so her child is doing so much better, and she's really happy about that. She also found a way to bring the sitting meditation into her life, because we talk, well, how can you fit it into your routine? She makes tea every night before she goes to bed. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes for the tea to boil, and so she'll do her sitting meditation while waiting for the tea to boil, and the signal that meditation is over is when the teapot starts whistling. So I thought that's a very wonderful way to embed a sitting meditation into one's life. The loving kindness practice is really important because that allows you to maintain a spirit of being loving toward your child, toward your other family members, toward people in the community, even though, things can get scratchy and problematic. Your child has a problem behavior and you get angry, or your husband or your wife doesn't respond to you in a caring way and you feel frustrated. Your children are upset with you and you don't know what to do. Someone in the community has treated you badly in some way, disrespectfully. All that can churn up lots of negative feelings. The loving kindness practice, if you can do this on a regular basis, helps dissipate that, keeps your heart clear, keeps it from harboring resentment, anger, fear, the desire to get back, or all of those negative things that can harm your well-being and mental health. So the loving kindness practice can keep you in a spirit of openness and care toward others, no matter what is presented to you in your daily life. And I believe teaching families at least those 3 practices can really, really help them do the self-care that they need to do at the same time that they're caring for their child in a very skillful way. Does that make sense? Does that help?
That is great, and I think that is a fantastic way to end on that note, because I think it's really useful to think about the different mindfulness approaches that you've mentioned. To be honest, some of them were completely novel to me, and I'm pretty sure that there are going to be people in the audience that are going to be very interested into looking into this more and finding out more about all these different approaches to mindfulness. It's definitely gaining a lot of traction in our field, which is fantastic.